I guess the second page, the fourth page was missing. Well, I guess we have to really submit them next month. I have to apologize this. I was kind of rushing through this, and also I don't think you had a chance to read them either, because I sent them today.
Okay. That's fine. We can certainly hold that over to next month. Okay. So that would leave us with just the April 24th minutes, if anyone would like to make a motion to approve those.
I move to approve.
I second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Our next item is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Anyone wishing to address us on general items may come up and speak to those for 3 minutes now.
Good evening. My name is Paulo Curry. I have 2 items I'd like to address. One is, I have asked, I think at this committee, and I certainly asked at city council meetings, that the hole in the ground just south of the children's daycare and the senior center, it's been there for 4 months now. And every time I've complained, I've noticed that what they do is they put out another cone next to it. And that is not the right thing to do. Now, I know it's PG&E's responsibility to fix it, but it's our responsibility to make sure that PG&E gets it fixed. And right on the sidewalk, just east, in front of Safeway, just east of the bus stop, there's another one, just the same. Big hole in the ground. Now, why can we not get those things fixed? Can we put a temporary cover over them, or can we insist that PG&E fixes these? I mean, this is silly. I mean, 3 months, 4 months to have a hole in the ground? And, there's nothing safe about that, especially when you have, like, small children coming out of the daycare center or whatever. They could easily crawl under there and fall into the, hole. And I've had people tell me that, I'll go take a look at it, and then nothing happens. So that's not good enough. Okay. And my other issue is...
Excuse me, what is the other location you mentioned? One is the senior center, and the other one is?
No, in front of Safeway.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's like just
It's
west,
the
west of Nielsen.
west corner
Yeah.
of Nielsen and Safeway,
Yeah.
I think.
You've seen it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why is it not fixed? I mean, is it not a safe way to put a cover over it until PG&E comes in and does whatever they want to do? There must be some reason. Okay. That's my first question, which I'm actually now in my 3rd month of asking that question, so I'm not going to ask it anymore. But my other main problem is I find that if I'm trying to cross the street here on, if I'm on Marin and I want to cross over like by Keynes, there are so many times I've come this close to be run over by cars because they see the green light and they speed up, right? And I think that either we need to do one or 2 things. One is, I know there's a long-term project, but we need to do something in the short term. It might mean that what we need to do is, put up some kind of flashing light to, to show people that that's a dangerous spot. But we all know that. I mean, just like on Solano Avenue, anywhere, you really can't guarantee that people are going to slow down and stop. But we could give them encouragement to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm Robert Hammer, 700 block of Pear Street. I want to bring to the Commission's attention that the rail traffic along by Cleveland and railroad tracks there has really increased, particularly with the tank cars. And I read in the paper the other day that it's increased by a factor of 5 in the last year and a half or so since beginning of 2013, and it's going to continue to increase. And these tank cars are apparently carrying bulk and crude oil. And that oil is very volatile. And if you have a fire, you can have a major problem because it goes underneath the freeway and underneath Buchanan. I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and that may be worth looking into and see if anything can be done to not have them park full cars, particularly along that section of that siding there. I don't know whether these cars are full of that oil or not, but it's worth looking into to find out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Irene Jacobson, homeowner and parent on the 400 block of Evelyn.
Go ahead.
And I thought the Creekside project would be discussed today. That's why I'm here, but I thought I'd make a point of saying in advance that my concern and all of our concerns is the children of our community. And the reason being is that Albany is not like other cities that people build creeks or build 3-story garages and condos next to. Albany is a small city. We also have 3 schools, the high schools and the middle schools and the McGregor are right there on the border of El Cerrito, and it's within blocks of each other. And because of this proximity, the size of our city and the proximity of these 3 schools, we need to approach, and I don't read El Cerrito's mind, but if they're not going to take into consideration the fact that we are not like other cities that can just take on, accept next door projects, but that we are small, and we do have to take into consideration the proximity of our those 3 schools that are right there. They're too close, and the streets over there are, actually all of Albany are not 2 lanes. They're 1 lane with cars parked on both sides. So I just want to make it point that we keep that into consideration when we have our next meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Amy Smollins, Albany Strollers and Rollers. What's that?
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Happy birthday to Jeremy if you're back there working tonight. Anyway, he's not, okay. And Keynes Avenue, just wanted to let you guys know I rode down to the waterfront recently, actually a couple times, noticed that the Buchanan bike lane, which had a big lengthwise gash down the whole thing, has been repaved, and that's a super wonderful surface. Great pavement now. It's going to make it a lot safer. It already has made it a lot safer. Wondering when the striping is going to go in, because the paving does appear finished to my eye. Also noticed the wayfinding signage that's coming to and from the waterfront, which is excellent, which is definitely going to be helping people who aren't sure how to get to East Shore Highway, to Target, to the waterfront, et cetera, down there. There does appear to be 1 sign that's missing. It's right at the top as the path passes the freeway on-ramp, crossing the freeway on-ramp. There was supposed to be some sign, a green sign that says this is the way to the waterfront, because I still do notice some people that don't know that the underpath is there, trying to cross the freeway, and that's not good. The Ohlone Greenway, the temporary markings have been in for a few weeks, and those are already helping pedestrians and cyclists go where they should be going. Wondering when the permanent markings are going to be in. And the pedestrian leadoff phase on Buchanan and Jackson and Pierce and Buchanan, really improving safety conditions. And I know those were done in response to a couple of Albany Strollers and Rollers requests for those. So thanks, keep it up. And yeah, just wondering when the final markings will get done on those other 2 projects, if you can, do you know that answer?
Yeah, we just approved the stencil for the arrows for the pedestrian markings and also for the bicycle markings on Ohlone Greenway. We placed the order tomorrow because they gave us some tests in size. It's not a traditional or regulatory marking. It's being designed for us. So the striping on Buchanan is going to be done in about 2 or 3 weeks. That's according to the current schedule, but things may change for 1 week or, because this happens in construction. And what is the other question? Oh, I'm going to find out with Caltrans what happened with the missing wayfinding signage under the overcrossing.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. And the pavement markings, usually on fresh pavement, you want to wait a little while so the pavement cures before you put the paint down, or it tends to bleed through. So
Is the last thing we're going to do.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Any other comments on items not on tonight's agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. Our first discussion item is 6A, installation of speed hump implementation on 900 block of Polk Street.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh,
For you,
I'm sorry, I skipped one.
Yep.
I wrote over it with my notes. The police report. We do have a police report tonight. We
Great.
missed a couple, so we're looking forward to this.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Kostenbader with the Police Department. I'm here on behalf of Lieutenant Geisberger, who wasn't available for tonight's meeting. I have 2 months' worth of statistics for the traffic, and I'll start with April's. Looks like in April we had a total of 12 traffic collisions. 7 of them were non-injury, 5 of them were injury, 5 of them were hit and run. 1 occurred on Marin, 1 involved an automobile versus a pedestrian. There were no school-related collisions and no bicycle-related collisions. It looks like there were a total of 398 moving citations that were written during April. That should be noted that during the month of April, we participated in the Office of Traffic Safety Distracted Driver campaign, focusing on drivers using their cell phones. During the campaign, we issued 286 citations for the people talking on cell phones or texting. There were a total of 13 arrests for driving while under the influence. And for May, there were a total of 12 traffic collisions. 8 of them were non-injury. There was 1 hit and run. 1 occurred on Marin. 1 involved the location of a school. And 1 was an auto versus a pedestrian, and there was 1 for a bicycle involvement. Moving citations for May was 186 moving citations, and there were a total of 5 arrests for driving while under the influence.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Great.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Have a good night.
Okay. Now we'll do 6A.
Well, thank you. Before you, I place a map that actually I did, or we did, between yesterday and today. So I apologize for the confusion sometimes on the notes, but this is more or less where there was a concern about speeding on Polk Street, at the 900 block of Polk Street. And in January, we conducted a speed and volume survey, and we found that the 85th percentile is at 30.4 miles per hour. Average daily traffic, 492 vehicles. This block, half of the block is a hill that has about maybe kind of 8.6%, and during half of the block, and the flat area is the south portion of segment of the block, which is starts about at 9:27 and to 9:49. We have received petition with about 80, very close to 90% of the households approving a traffic calming measure. We do have guidelines that were developed a couple of years ago for traffic calming, particularly speed humps. And what we did, it was to superimpose on a layer the speed hump with the advanced bars and signage. We only have room for 1 speed hump according to the characteristics of the street, and the only location that is suitable for this speed hump is between 9:30 and 9:31. I don't know if there's some members of the public who live on that block. Okay, if you have questions about this implementation, we're thinking that we can do it with either pavement project this year or next year pavement project. And there are some funds on the CIP for traffic calming that we can use for the implementation of the speed hump.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners? Okay. So any members of the public who want to speak on this, please come on up to the podium.
I live at 921 Polk, and
Your name again?
Phyllis Zisman. And I am concerned about, and I agree that we need a speed hump there, but I am more concerned that you fix the terrible sinkhole, sinking spot that we have before you do anything else, because I think that that would be counterproductive to have to take things out again. And that are you aware of that?
I am aware
Okay.
of that, and it's going to be fixed.
When? Do you have a
This pavement
timeline?
project, I don't know exactly when, but it's this
But
pavement
before
project.
they do the,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is George Baranowski. I live at 918 Polk, and I'm just wondering why the particular site was chosen as opposed to other possible places.
Other possible place, one of the residents is not supporting the speed hump in front of his or her house.
And that was the house one up the hill,
I think it's
right?
926.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Would it be possible, or what makes the site?
What is the start of the hill? At that point, the hills, this is very hilly, and according to
Okay.
our policy, we cannot put speed humps on hills.
Okay, I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make certain. Okay, no more questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay. So back to the commission, and recommended action is to discuss the location, provide recommendation to pursue implementation if the location's all right. So any thoughts on that? Or motion?
I guess I have a question, though. Sorry, I didn't see this before. Is it a speed hump or a speed table?
This is a speed hump. Speed table has the flat area on between the two arrows.
Right.
So this one's 12 feet long, and it's just a arc rather than having a level top. Okay.
Is there a reason that it can't have a level top?
Well, we don't want, although people can cross wherever they want, we don't want to really put something that they can cross there. We're trying to guide them through the intersection, at the intersections, to cross at the intersections.
Yeah, usually you would go with a speed table if you had a lot of emergency vehicles on the route and you wanted to accommodate those. The speed hump is going to be more aggressive to control speeds than a speed table would necessarily. So it seems appropriate for this location. All right. And it certainly makes sense to do this with the next round of paving so that we don't wait any longer than we need to.
Yeah, the other one that is on the waiting list is 2 blocks on Masonic Street, Masonic Avenue, and but Masonic is going to be repaved next year, so we're going to do it when it's repaved.
Okay.
I move that we put this on the list for implementation.
Okay, there's
Can
an additional public
Oh,
comment.
I'm sorry.
Please come on up.
If you could clarify, will this be similar to what's on Cerrito Street in terms of the way it's laid out?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
And just to clarify, just to add, these are smooth humps. I mean, they're not really, they're designed to be, to actually keep traffic at 25 when, in this case, we cannot put another one because we have a hill and we have the constraint of the physical characteristics of the street, but we can actually implement some like slow traffic on the pavement and see how, monitor the speeds after the implementation of one, see what we can do if speeds still are at 30 or, higher.
Right, so, relative to the hill, the location's fairly close to the center of the block, which seems more optimal. We only get one. So we had a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Right.
Move on to 6B, which is the Marin Curtis Safe Routes to School project, 95% plans. Do we have a report on that?
Yes, about a couple of months ago, we presented the concept plans for the Marin Santa Fe and Marin Curtis Safe Routes School project, and Sonoma and Curtis. We received comments, and the comments have been also included in this new in the 95% plans. We also have received the engineer's estimate at 95% level, and we have Atul Patel here, Paul Snyder, to make a presentation. They're the designers for this project, and I want to see if they can explain the details to us.
Great, thank you.
Question, are you going to be using that laptop, or do you want me to bring the plans here on this computer? Okay.
While we're waiting for that, just to clarify what we'll be discussing tonight, we previously commented on the 65% plans, so the 95% plans are essentially about the last point. You have an opportunity to comment, and if that looks good, then we'd be recommending to council to call for bids to construct this. The funding's in place per the Safe Routes to School grant, so that's really the next step is implementation.
Funding is from the Safe Routes to School grant and local, pass-through funds. Hopefully, the implementation is slated for the fall of this year.
Very good, thank you. All right.
I think the bulk of the questions that we had last time and the comments were surrounding the intersection of Sonoma and Curtis. If you go to page 4, I think that shows the best. One more. Perfect, thank you. In the previous design, both of the corners were sort of bulbed out. If you look at this corner where it kind of comes out into the street a little bit, both corners there were 2 crosswalks that crossed the street, and it just seemed like that intersection was getting very cramped, very crowded. We didn't need the second crosswalk. And there's some of the geometry and the slopes that were out there were getting a little difficult. So that intersection was cut back with the level of improvements. Just there's one now shortened crosswalk, which shortens the crossing for the students that are going to cross there, which is a little safer. They stay in the intersection a briefer amount of time. And the other corner is a little bit more of a standard corner, which is primarily we get garbage trucks and fire trucks and other vehicles through there. The gray shading you see is really just a result of the pavement reconstruction we have to do to get those corners to work. So there isn't really much there. It's just that intersection was primarily dialed back, for a better way to put it. It was also a matter of trying to stay within the budget that was available for the project. That intersection was getting quite expensive. If you could go to the next page, I can show you, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate for you to ask questions at any point, but feel free. The improvements at the main intersection of Marin and Curtis, again, there are sort of 4 bulb outs. One of the biggest comments was the corner where the school is. was made, the crossings or the approach, the accessible ramp was made wider. So there's a lot of real estate on that corner now to let the kids and the bikes and what have you queue up to get across the street. There were a lot of questions surrounding the driveway on this corner. That was studied with the homeowner in about 5 or 6 different ways. And the configuration that's there was really the preferred option at the 65% level, and by the homeowner and by the design team as well and city staff. Other than that, there were a couple of comments by the resident who may be here tonight, talking about the driveway and what was happening. The goal to save the trees, which we've done a good job. We aren't taking the trees out on the corners. And we're really coming up with some pretty creative drainage schemes, which was another way to bring the project down under the budget and still avoid, still make sure that the drainage will get to where it needs to go to without flooding. I think the last comment that we addressed as we moved in was the comment about the sort of the geometry of the bulb out and making sure that bikes can get around the corners. They were sort of bulbing out a little bit further before, so we sort of brought those back in towards the sidewalk a little bit, which again would help a little bit with the drainage and helps get the bikes around the corner. I think, do you have anything to say about the last piece, the flashing crosswalks? Do you want to?
You want to get to the striping plan later? Yeah, this is good. So there's 4 high visibility crosswalks planned at the intersection Marin Curtis. Along with that, we have the rapid rectangular flashing beacons on the Marin approaches. You can see that on the corners, in each of the corners there. What those look like if you get to the next page. Well, next page is Sonoma Curtis and shows the high visibility crosswalks at that intersection too. And then if you go to the last page, this is what the solar-powered rapid rectangular flashing beacon signs will look like. It'll have the beacons right in between the static signage, and you will activate those with a 88 push button. That's pretty much it for our presentation. We'll take questions.
Questions from commissioners?
Well, I have one question, but I think it's related more for you. Am I correct that this is about $350,000 for this project? Is that what I saw somewhere on here? Give or take.
Total construction cost, yeah.
So will there be a public art piece in
There's
this?
going to be a public, it's not here, but we're going to add it when we finalize the plans.
Okay.
And we'll present it to council too.
Thank you.
I'm back on PD 1, so the second to last page, I think.
Crosswalks on Marin and Curtis.
Crosswalks in Marin and Curtis, third to the last page. Yeah. It looks like there's, if you're going eastbound, which in this picture would be from left to right, it looks like there's quite a shift in the middle of the intersection for traffic to make. Yeah, maybe existing. Is there anything that guides cars through that shift, or is it just an abrupt change?
Oh, I see. Yeah, there's an existing horizontal curve in the intersection. We could put some dash lines through that to help them guide them through the intersection. Some dashed striping.
I guess I've had that experience driving up Marin, where there is a shift in an intersection. It's kind of a surprise to me. And I'd hate to have somebody end up driving in the bike lane and forcing a bicyclist off into the high visibility post.
Yeah, we can definitely look at it, adding that in.
For the dash lines, I'd suggest the bike lane would be the thing to mark. So if you do dash lines for the bike lane through the intersection, then cars necessarily
They can hug
stay to the left of
yeah.
that.
Okay, that's a good point.
Okay?
Also,
so
that would be the case for the westbound direction also, is that
Yeah,
right?
both
Both
directions would
directions.
make
Both
sense for the
directions,
bike
yeah.
lanes to track through the intersection. I think that provides sufficient constraint for the cars. Because there is a tendency where the road curves at an intersection for cars to start drifting into the bike lane. They somehow are better at not drifting into the oncoming traffic.
Right.
Not too surprising.
There is some NACTO, very nice NACTO guidelines for intersection markings. I think I brought them up five or
Yeah.
6 months ago.
I just look for whatever's typical for marking bike lanes through intersections and use that. I think that ought to address a very good point here.
I think that would.
Okay,
Good.
so we're going to take some public comments, and rather than have back and forth between you and the public, I'll note any questions they might have, and then we may call you back up afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, so anyone from the public who would like to comment on this, please come on up.
Would you please fill out a card that it's in the back with your name? Thanks.
Hi, my name's Dave Zanana. I live at the intersection of Curtis and Sonoma. I had a number of questions. First off, timing. Originally, I think this project was to be constructed during the summer when the school was out. What I heard today was fall. How is the city really proposing to do construction during the school time that school is in session? And if not, what guarantees does it have that it can be completed during a break? Because you're losing two major intersection flows to that school, and I don't think you can do it during the school time period safely. Second question I had was the somewhat significant change between the 65% and the 95% plan, eliminating 33% of the crosswalks at the intersection of Curtis and Sonoma. I heard the explanation. I didn't hear anything addressing safety issues, which is what this is about, and I don't understand, and perhaps we can get an explanation as to how compelling any student or child walking from the south side of Sonoma to cross two streets instead of one to get to school enhances the safety of their route to school. I have additional concerns or questions about the lack of a significant bulb out at that southeast corner, which is where cars tend to cheat the right turn. So even if there is not a crosswalk on that southeast side, they are coming into the crosswalk at Sonoma at greater speed perhaps than they should. And additionally, then, if there are any additional measures that could be taken to increase the rate of compliance with the stop sign at that southern approach from Curtis. And I know, I believe from the video from the last meeting, there was discussion of raised crosswalks and budget concerns, but I don't think being penny wise and pound foolish here is the right way to go. And when you're making a significant change like this, you need, documented assurance that you're enhancing safety for the city's own liability concerns if there ever was an accident. Those are my comments and questions.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, Amy Smolens, Albany Strollers and Rollers. First of all, thanks to you guys for improving the geometry of the bulb out to make it safer for cyclists turning. Appreciate that. I want to just pass on the input of an Albany stroller and roller who can't attend tonight, Alan Eckert. He just wanted to make the point that the request, when the cuts are made in the cement, to cut it along the boundary, what will be the boundary between the bike lane and the travel lane. So when it's redone, there won't be seams or lips going across or down the bike lane, because that ends up being hazardous. I mean, that happens sometimes. There's either a crosswise lip, and that kind of is like a train track type thing, or anything lengthwise is also hazardous, because a lot of times it ends up being just a tire width. So if you can make the cut at the location, that will be the future lane marker for between the bike lane and the travel lane, that would be great. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers on this one? Okay, bring it back to commission. So a couple of questions we had in particular about the Curtis-Sonoma intersection. Maybe we could address those. I'll kind of start with the last one in terms of budget issues. This is funded by the Safe Routes to School grant, which is obviously a specific amount. So I assume that we are running up against the limit on that, or do we have any money to spare?
Yeah, it's basically we're actually using the Safe School grant as the bulk of the funding for this project. Anything more, we will have to really ask council to allocate more funding.
Okay. All right. So then the other questions were the construction schedule, and if it's possible to avoid doing during the school year, and if not, what are the mitigations for that, and a little bit more about the removal of the third crosswalk at that intersection and the bulb at the corner.
I can at least address the logic of Sonoma as to why the third leg of the crosswalk. We got a little bit of feedback from city staff and some of our own observations that, if you could go back to, I think it's page 5, Alita. The crosswalk that is on the southern portion that we eliminated, what was happening was the gap between the two crosswalks was so wide that if there were kids crossing in both, there was a tendency for cars to potentially be trapped in between. Therefore, it kind of created a little bit of an unsafe scenario. We looked at moving this bulb out on this corner and trying to move this crosswalk as close as we could to the intersection, again, to shorten the distance between those two crosswalks, and we weren't very successful at coming up with a way to do that. And then again, part of our exercise was to utilize the funding that was available, and to reduce the significance of this one corner was one way to do that. Now, having cars cheat that corner, I don't know that it's a new piece of information, but it's certainly something that we can try and consider. Again, I believe that's going to be mainly budget driven. So there's going to be a little bit of a, how can we best use the funds to do the best we can to improve the safety? In terms of the construction schedule, it's not going to be able to happen on a break. I know that.
That's right. We had unintended delays on the design process, and if we don't do it this year, it will be until next year. Grant-wise, we still have time. The funds do not expire, but it will be another summer in 2015. Our approach was to talk to the school district and to coordinate with them. We think that this project is not going to be a long project, but can be finished maybe in about 5 weeks or 6. I think that's the most, even less. But we have to coordinate with the school district, and depending on their on what their feedback, we will have to wait for the construction, maybe, if they don't agree. I mean, there is also another break of 2 weeks during the winter, but then we don't know if we're going to have a very wet winter, and we cannot build that way.
One of the things we have done to somewhat mitigate that is we've carried a reasonably robust amount of traffic control, which is an indicator, and we haven't put it in the project specification because we need to talk to the school district first, is we've had projects like this where literally the intersection is 4 phases. Each corner is done independently. It's a little bit of a nightmare on the contractor to move things around, and it's more expensive because they have to mobilize different pieces of equipment at different points in time. But we can, at the very least, try to keep 2 corners of the main intersection open at all times to accommodate the school district. That is a possibility at not too much of a premium, and that's, again, part of a conversation we need to have, especially while school is in session. There certainly are some breaks that we could try to take advantage of to reduce the amount of phasing. And then this intersection as well, we could try and do the one side together while leaving the other side and the existing crosswalk open as well. So there's things that could be phased a little bit to try and shorten that window of inconvenience and congestion that'll naturally happen as a result of that.
Yeah, there's always be inconvenience, but the trade-off is that we're trying to enhance these 2 intersections and have it ready for this school year.
Right. I think at Marin and Curtis, the pedestrian flow up and down Marin is probably the more critical direction. So if you're working on 2 corners at a time, it should either be the north side or the south side. The crossing of Marin can happen for the time being at Santa Fe or up at Peralta where the signals are. But we wouldn't want to block all east-west flow of pedestrians on Marin at any time. That just seems to me the more critical. And in terms of improving compliance with stop signs, if there was something other than enforcement that did that, I'd love to hear about it. I can't quite tell from the drawing whether with removal of the crosswalk, the stop sign northbound on Curtis is being moved closer into the intersection. So that, for the right turners, that makes for a tighter turn after they stop.
Right, yeah, that's the new plans are showing the stop bar pushed forward. We saw that by pushing it forward, at least they have more visibility of the pedestrians that are crossing at the intersection.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Couple of things. I really like raised crosswalks, and I understand the money piece, but I think it's worth looking at and maybe going to council and saying, you know, we need X amount of dollars more. And see what they say. And my other thought about doing it during the school year, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Winter break has a lot of legal holidays in there, and so it's not really 2 weeks of working time. It's a lot of holidays. But also, perhaps we could figure out a way to have more crossing guards available during the construction time.
I want to thank you for being responsive to our comments.
Oh, you're welcome.
And, I had the one issue with the shifting of the intersection, and if you just addressed that, I think it looks good to me.
Okay. All right.
And I should add that I think it's important to go forward with this project, even if there is some inconvenience and some congestion because of the state of the sidewalks that are currently around the school and the severe uplifts that are currently rather dangerous. And we don't have crossing guards, for example, at those uplifts. And this project addresses so much of that. I think it's important to do it soon.
All right, so what you're pointing out is the sidewalk repair that we haven't really commented on much on Curtis as part of this.
Curtis, yeah.
Yeah. Good
And
point.
repair and re-engineering to prevent flooding that now occurs there.
Right. Oh, those are significant. Okay. So I'd look for a motion to recommend to council to call for bids to authorize the city manager to enter into a construction contract and get this done.
Are we going to ask for the raised crosswalks?
Certainly can add that, yeah.
Okay.
I guess the question for raised crosswalk, let's talk about that for a moment. My first thought was, well, we can just add that in next time we do a paving project, except you really can't because crosswalks have to meet ADA slopes. So the curb ramps dip down, and then you'd have to have a raised speed table that has to ramp back up. By the time you're done with a crossing of this length, you've basically got a bump in the middle of the intersection, and half the crossing is ramps up and down. Alternately, you have to bridge over the drainage flow at the gutter, which is doable, but it becomes a maintenance issue. Maybe you put a steel plate so that the gutter channel remains, but you can lift up the steel plate that pedestrians can walk or roll across when you need to access to clear it out, because just putting a pipe there tends to just be a point that clogs up. But if we want to ask council to do that, I think that would involve a redesign to remove the curb cuts in order to just bridge over the gutter line.
Do you think it's worth doing?
It can be. I guess part of the question is strategically, what degree of benefit are you getting? And if it's at a stop sign, and we know people tend to roll through stop signs, but they at least slow down at a stop sign, one would hope. How much advantage are we providing if we put a raised crosswalk there? Not saying that there's none, but
Well, right, I agree with,
Well, could we at least figure out how much it would cost so that we're giving council and
sure. So
real facts?
Yeah, if we ask for an ad alternate and a cost estimate for what it would take to make that a raised crosswalk, give council an opportunity. Hopefully not too big a change if we don't change the gutter flow lines, but just bridge over them.
yeah, we can include, you're thinking of one from Sonoma to Curtis? Is that the raised crosswalk or?
If I'm understanding correctly, what we're thinking of is the north crosswalk on Curtis at Sonoma.
Okay. The small one.
Right.
What I've heard from the previous calls is that people actually speed down the hill on Sonoma. That's basically the very fast right turn there. And I think it's addressed by the bulb out, especially on the north side, northeast side.
Were you thinking of the same one that I was, or crossing of Sonoma?
I was actually thinking of both, but I mean, I think the speed down Sonoma probably sounds like it would be a problem because you're going downhill. Can we, since we're doing an add-on, can we do two add-ons, one for one and one for two?
Or just a cost for each, because they're probably independent.
Okay. So that'd be one add-on would be cost for each one separately? Is that what you're saying?
Well, add-on for a Curtis raised crosswalk and another add-on for a raised crosswalk on Sonoma. So an independent cost for each one, then council could pick or choose one or the other or both.
Okay, that sounds good to me. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to recommend to council to issue a call for bids and authorize the city manager to enter into a construction contract for this project with the two add-ons for the raised crosswalks, each of them separate and independent.
I'll second that. The council has asked us to provide them with options, and I think this is a reasonable option. I'm not sure the language captures that we're recommending that they consider the options, but it's implied. I just think it could be a little more straightforward.
Well, I think the 100% plans will reflect the option of the raised crosswalks, is that right? So it's going to be there on the plans
Okay.
as an optional task.
Right, so as I would interpret it, it would be to take the existing 95% plans, complete the 100% plans, and have an option that adds either or both crosswalks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically that. Well, in the detail will be in the plans as an optional item,
Right.
depending on the council action.
So, yeah, so the construction detail for that location is going to show two alternatives, or
Totally.
one basic alternative plus two potential add-ons. So if you drew a cloud around each one of the crosswalks on the plans, you've got a separate.
I have a
construction
concern.
detail to plug in
Do we
there.
need to eliminate the stop sign then?
No.
If we're going to have the raised crosswalk?
I don't think so. I think that, for example, the concern about the traffic making a right turn rather quickly after they stop, if they're immediately going to hit a raised crosswalk, they're going to tend to go slower for the turn. So there is a benefit. It's more in the departure direction than it is in the direction entering the intersection.
So are you okay now?
I think so.
Okay? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. So with that, our
That's exciting.
next item, 6C, is the active transportation plan signing and striping projects 95% design. So we previously commented on the 65% design on those as well, and now we want to hear how things look for the 95%. And so just one point of clarity here. Our desired action is to approve the 95% plans, direct staff to proceed with development of construction plans, and recommendation to council to approve the final plans, but there's no current construction funding to do all this. So this is just preparing the plan so we can go out and seek grant funds or any other source of funds we can to build. Yes?
Well, yeah, I want to clarify a little
Maybe
bit on
more.
that. So,
Okay.
yeah, as you said, we have received comment on the 65% plans a couple of months ago. And there were several comments that we can go through when we go project by project. There are some of them, as you know, were related to the center line of the Sharrows location relative to the curb, extending the Sharrows to the city limits. Also there were some additions for a request for additions of routes in bicycle lanes. We have addressed those comments, and these 95% comments present a detail on also signage. We have received comments from the Solars and Rollers regarding signage and location, location of signage and also destinations. And we have Ryan McLean and Parminder Sandhu from Fair and Pierce, who are here to present the projects and give us details. Regarding the implementation, we're trying to implement as much as I can with this pavement that we have in 2014 and 2015. There is remaining budget for implementation in the CIP, and we can actually try to do as much as I can. Maybe it's not going to be enough for everything, but we think that we can achieve these projects with local funding, not grants.
Okay, great. That's good news. All right, Ryan.
All right. Good evening, commissioners. So as Leda said, we took all the feedback that we got on the 65% and have been also coordinating with the strollers and rollers to get these plans to a point where we feel pretty good about all the various treatments that we're implementing. So the idea tonight was just to kind of go through where we've gone between 65 and 95%. And I actually changed the slide order a little bit from the plan order to minimize the amount of you guys getting up and sitting down and getting up and sitting down. But actually, since Commissioner Chomsky isn't here, he was the one I think who was getting up the most. So the first one is Pierce, which I think Commissioner Javindal was.
So since there's only 3 of us here tonight, we can't maintain quorum if any of us step aside, so we're all going to have to participate in all of them.
Okay.
So that makes things easier for you.
Yes, it does.
There we go. And us.
Okay, so starting with Pierce, the comments on Pierce were so overall the project is to provide sharrows along Pierce, and so some of the comments were to take it to the city limits, which is now showing going to the city limits, and as well to place signage on the southbound side directing people onto the bike path or showing that as an option. So we've now got a sign on there that says bike path and has an arrow over to the path. So those were the primary comments on Pierce Street. So next is Jackson Street, and so there are several comments on this. I'm going to start with the section. Section just north of Buchanan, which was where we were looking at various treatment options because we don't quite have enough room for bike lanes in each direction. And so we had discussed potentially doing advisory bike lanes, which the commission had directed us to take a closer look at. We did look at that. So the conclusion there was that the volumes are really too high for what would be typically used for advisory bike lanes. So instead of that, we looked towards doing a bike lane in one direction and sharrows in the other direction. What the plans show is a bike lane in the northbound direction. The reasoning behind that was that bicyclists and cars leaving the signal will be grouped together, and so getting them separated out as they leave the signal would help resolve that. Now, there has been a lot of suggestions by the strollers and rollers that there's a lot of school traffic heading southbound, bicycles and cars, and so it would actually be beneficial to have the bike lane in the southbound direction. So that's the discussion there. The current plans show it in the northbound. Additionally to that, there's a request to extend the bike box at the intersection, which we did. That's going northbound. We added detector symbols in the southbound direction. There was a request to have a bike box in the southbound direction, but in that case, we needed to have a bike lane that goes to the bike box. Since we didn't have that, we placed a stop bar in advance of the crosswalk and then left bike stencils there so that they know to wait there. If we did implement the southbound bike lane, we could, well, actually, no, because it can't get all the way to the intersection because of the configuration. So that was implemented. And then also, since then, there have been some comments about making sure that the sharrows connect all the way, the bike route connects all the way down to 8th Street. And so we've added some signage and markings to indicate that. And and also lastly, so the portion south of Buchanan is university property, so the city can't directly implement that. But as a suggestion, we also are showing back in angled parking along that stretch. There's a lot of places that have the perpendicular parking and the angled parking there. And so as part of the sharrowed route, we thought this might be another opportunity to test that out, since the other one did not work out. So that was it for Jackson. Uh, Next is Talbot, and on Talbot, most of the comments focused on the partial closure contraflow bicycle lane north of Brighton. And so some of the comments last time were concern about vehicles turning the wrong direction, since we're now going to have a centerline stripe that's dashed to separate bikes. So the commission's suggestion there was to move bikes to the right and have an island kind of in between that. And then you'll have a do not enter sign right in front of where the cars would go. So to kind of clarify that. And then to enhance that, we're showing sharrows going through the intersection to direct bikes to where they can go and make it clear that bikes are allowed to go the other direction. As part of that, the transition area needed is about 35 feet. So that means you lose about 2 parking stalls to accommodate that transition. And I think that's it for Talbot.
Do you want questions as we go? Or
If you want, you can ask questions now.
the 2 parking places that we'll lose, where are they?
So they are on the east side of Talbot at the intersection with Brighton, on the northeast corner.
Okay, so they're in front of single-family homes or apartments, or?
The apartments.
Apartments, okay. Thank you.
Next was Dartmouth. Dartmouth, there was discussion about shifting the locations of the traffic circles so that they were kind of evenly spaced and removing the run from Masonic because of the additional traffic, bicycle, pedestrian traffic from the Albany Greenway. So we added one to Evelyn and removed it from Masonic and Talbot. There was also discussion about removing so right now the Talbot-Dartmouth intersection is always stop controlled. And so there was discussion about removing the stop control on Dartmouth and just stopping traffic on Talbot. And based on the traffic volumes that we saw there, that would definitely place the stop signs on the lower volume piece of the intersection. And it doesn't meet always stop warrants. So that is something that could definitely be done in terms of removing the stop signs, 2 of the stop signs. And that basically would allow bikes on the bicycle boulevard to travel through. All right, and then next was...
But Talbot is a bicycle route also.
It is.
So there's a trade-off there.
There is. Bicycle boulevards tend to be really the enhanced routes where you start to really accommodate bicyclists more by removing the stop signs and that sort of treatment. Bike routes, not as much. So that would be the trade-off.
Okay.
And next I have Masonic, which is potentially out of order due to trying to shift things around. So Masonic, the main comment was concern about operational analysis at the traffic signals at Solano and Marin, because the plan included creating a right turn pocket to separate the right turn movements from the bicycles, and we had an advisory bike lane there. And so there was concern that the left turns waiting on Masonic to turn left onto the other streets would block the through traffic if it was all channelized into a single through left lane. So we conducted operational analysis of that, and it still shows that level of service is B at those locations. So B as in boy. So we didn't see a big operational change there. So we continue to show that and recommend that treatment there. Then I had Francis, which so Francis, the comment that we've worked with strollers and rollers on is making sure that the connection at the jog on Nelson Street is clear as Francis jogs to across that intersection. So we've added some additional sharrows, including sharrows that have the angled arrow markings and are much more for kind of wayfinding than actual positioning of the bike. So that really defines that continuation of the Francis bike route onto and off of Nelson. So that was the change there.
There's some indications of where signs would be, I think, in this, but you didn't show the signs themselves. Are they standard signs? Or,
No, we show the standard signs. There's a lot of wayfinding custom signs, which we have a lot of those shown, but not all of them. And what we're really looking for to work with strollers and rollers on that is destinations and those and locations. So that's the next step, is to work with them. So these are kind of examples and a starting point, but in terms of the wayfinding signage, that's where we still need to work with them on.
Great.
So next was Peralta. So Peralta, we have the uphill bike lane in the two directions, and it switches over at the top. One of the comments was to add more sharrows at the top to clearly define that the bikes are moving into the travel lane. So we've done that. Also to continue the sharrows to the city limit, which we've now added that to the city limit. We've also added some additional pavement legends for slow going over the hill, and had recommended actually changing the warning. There's a warning sign for the raised crosswalk that's has an advisory speed of 25 miles per hour. We're recommending that be lowered to 15 because the advisory, you really want the advisory to be lower than what the speed limit is, just because otherwise people start to think that the speed limit's higher because you have these warning signs. And it makes sense for a speed table treatment like that. One thing that we don't have on here that there were comments on, because I think we had a misunderstanding on, was the location where the speed limit is set to 15 miles an hour for the hill. And there was a request to add some pavement legends for that. We understand that request now, and we will add those in.
Great.
So now to Santa Fe. So on Santa Fe, we had placed edge line, edge stripe to create 10-foot travel lanes. And there was concern that that created too large of a parking strip there, and that cars would end up parking too close to that edge line and away from the curb, and there could be conflicts there. So what we've done is added a second line to define the parking area and also narrow the line. This is for the one block as kind of a trial area to see if it's successful in kind of reducing speeds along there as a traffic calming measure. So we've added that to the plans. And in addition, this was another location where we've extended it to the city limits.
I had a question, just looking closely at the plan. And sorry, I've got a laser, I'm not going to point in your eyes. But here at the intersection of Santa Fe and Solano, both on this northwest corner and the southeast corner, there's a pair of sign indications that looks like the signs are overlapping one another.
Yeah, actually, that those signs are part of the bicycle box detail. And so on the first page, we've got the callouts for what those signs are. They're standard, and they are stacked signs right there. One is the stop here on red for the cars, so that's that first one that you see.
Okay.
And then the other is the yield to bike sign. And it's kind of the standard treatment, and that's really for once the cars are at the line, then they see the yield to.
Because they're at an angle and they can
Right.
see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
That makes more sense.
Okay. So next, we go to Washington. So one of the big additions here was the crosswalk at Pomona in Washington that I don't believe was discussed at the 65%, but has since been added to the plans. This is another jog location. So this is where Washington jogs along Pomona. And currently the stop bars were placed kind of in the middle of the two legs of Washington, the stop bars on Pomona, and wasn't really a standard intersection treatment. So this adds a crosswalk, pulls those stop bars back, and adds sharrows through the intersection to really, again, guide bicyclists along the continuation of the bike boulevard. So that's a new addition. And then, yeah, that was the main thing on Washington, was that. So now key route. So one of the main comments on this was getting it all the way up to the El Cerrito city limit. So that has been done. In the plans that were previously posted, we had the bike lane that coming from El Cerrito southbound ending once it got to the intersection at Brighton. But there's been requests to extend that bike lane, and we have the width, even with the two lanes, two sides of parking, to extend that all the way southbound. So the updated plans now show that. We did get that in there. We also looked at doing the northbound bike lane, but to do that, we'd end up with a 10-foot travel lane right adjacent to parked cars on the left side. So it becomes pretty tight in there with the parking, with the 10-foot lane, with the bike lane, and more parking. So we recommended against putting a bike lane in that direction and stick with sharrows through that area. So next, going to Portland. Main change with Portland was, as discussed at the 65% meeting, that we would not try to do the back-end angle parking in this location because of the substandard dimensions for that kind of treatment. So that's removed, and that was the primary change on Portland. Going to Poston. Poston, we previously had not shown a bike lane in the downhill direction, in the westbound direction, because of the higher speeds of bikes and them potentially wanting to take the full lane at the higher speeds. But we did have the width, and we were directed to add the bike lane. Excuse me. So we added that in, and I believe the version that was posted had a 6-foot bike lane, but after further discussions, we've increased that to 6.5 feet, just to give a little extra space for the higher speeds of bikes going downhill. That reduces the lane width of the downhill vehicle lane to 10.5 feet, which has the potential to also slow down traffic somewhat. So that was because of that steep hill there that we increased that width. And that was it for Poston. I should add that throughout, we went with the minimum dimension of 12 feet from the center of a sharrow to the curb. So that's been, and both for sharrows and for the bike boulevard legends. So those changes have been made throughout as well. On Sonoma, there was no major changes there. And Spokane, there was concern about the cul-de-sac at the city limit with all the parents picking up and dropping off up there. And so we've added in to refresh the red curb around there and add no stopping signs, because I think a lot of people saw the no parking sign as inviting people to sit there and wait. And so going with no stopping signs there. And then the other question that was raised was about reversing the stop signs at Portland and Spokane to favor the bike boulevard on Spokane. So the stop signs would then be on Portland. So we looked at the traffic volumes there, and it's about a 90% to 10% split, with 90% of the traffic being on Portland. So the concern there is once you start putting stop signs on the lower volume pieces, or on the higher volume pieces, that you lose compliance. It's the problem with when you don't meet warrants and you put up stop signs and that sort of thing. So for that reason, we're not recommending making the switch now. If down the line there's a lot of bike traffic, the demand for bikes increases considerably, then that could be something that is looked at again. So that brings me to the conclusion of my presentation. So, any questions?
Okay. Any questions? We're asked for public comment.
Could we go back to Dartmouth for a minute? Mm-hmm. To the traffic circles? Has there been any discussion with public safety about getting around the traffic circles?
So the traffic circle details are still, we need to work out with public safety. We did receive the fire truck dimensions and ran turn templates around the dimensions that we have and showed those to work. We still have to share that with public safety. But so the dimensions we're trying to finalize. The treatment is really something else that we need to look into deeper in terms of how substantial these are, what kind of planting, because there's maintenance concerns with that. So that's something we still need to detail out. I mean, it could range from something where it could even be just a mountable surface that the fire safety could get through if they needed to. So that detail and the signs are the things that we need to finalize.
Okay. Open it up for public comment. Anything that you want to comment on these plans?
Good evening. My name is Olivier Theriault, 800 block of Jackson. And I had a question, basic question. I missed the 65% meeting. My notice came 2 days late. What is the difference between bike boulevards and the sharrows? And also my other comment is, would it be possible to make the speed limit on the bike boulevards be 15 miles an hour instead of 25 miles an hour to both reduce the car speed and also maybe discourage some cars from driving on those bike boulevards? So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Walter Hammer, 700 block of Pear Street. I have a couple of comments and maybe questions on the Pear Street route. The first one is when you look at the traffic that comes by, especially going southbound on Pear Street, as it comes over that S-bend where the visibility is not all that good, I've clocked them with a little radar gun at over 45 miles an hour. And so they're going 20 miles an hour of speed limit, so I have a little concern about safety with a sharrow. That is, you need a way of making sure that the traffic is aware of this and slows down. I see that there is a crosswalk where the Pierce Street Park Plaza will be marked on it for future development. I don't know how it's going to how the plans here are going to interface with what's being designed for the park. And also, I think there's one raised crosswalk that might be missing. I understood there is a raised crosswalk at Calhoun across Pierce Street, and that's not there in the plan that I saw. And so these are the things I think that should be considered to calm the traffic there. I hope that the sharrows are enough to calm the traffic, but I'm not convinced that they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcia Skinner, 984 Peralta. I'm appreciative that he mentioned that they had recognized my neighbor's comments at the meeting about this the last time regarding our 15-mile-an-hour speed limit that exists on the block of Peralta between Marin and Sonoma. I have a question on page 22 about the center line on that block. I can't tell if it's just a crummy Xerox or if we're back to the earlier proposal to make that a dashed line replacing the solid line that's there, which was the other comment that same neighbor had made, is we were really all very strenuously opposed to changing that and permitting people to pass at the top of the hill because we think people will end up nose to nose. And this looks suspiciously unsolid on page 22 on that center lane.
Okay.
My name is Gary Glenn. I live at 957 Peralta. First, I would like to support what Marcia Skinner just said. I think it's a very important point. My house is just over the top of the hill, just as the curve starts to take place. I'm sure you're familiar with this. It's a very dangerous spot. Every single morning, I worry, A, that a car is not going to make the curve, as has happened 3 times in the recent years, one of which resulted in a very serious accident, which could have resulted in multiple fatalities. Fortunately, it didn't, but there were major injuries. The problem is that drivers coming up Peralta, going toward Marin, speed up as they're coming up the hill. When they reach the top, they're already going fairly fast. They're going over 15 miles an hour. And typically, they have to make a quick adjustment to make the turn. If they don't make that adjustment, they either crash into cars or endanger pedestrians and certainly bicyclists. I certainly support the idea of increasing bicycle traffic in Albany, but my concern is danger, especially on that particular block of Peralta, because of the existing circumstances. I would like to urge, if it's possible, for the police department to enforce the 15-mile-an-hour limit. I have never once seen any car stopped on Peralta for exceeding the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, even though clear observation shows that it's happening all the time. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Preston Jordan. I'm speaking for Albany Strolls and Rollers tonight. And first, I want to thank yourselves and city staff and the engineers for a wonderful plan and a lot of detail orientation, and thank the previous speakers. I think they've offered a lot of good input. So I first have just some overall comments. I know in the last meeting, I think there was a discussion of indicating door zones in the bike lane in some manner by some symbology, creating a buffer to motivate people to cycle away from the parked vehicles. With the lanes the width they are, we think they can only be 2 feet wide, those buffers, if they went in, which is too narrow to securely place somebody so that they're safe from getting doored. So we're not, as an organization, in favor of those at this point, but we still would like some door zone indication. So there were some other ideas that came up. One was actually from Aleda in a discussion about restriping on Buchanan, which was to offset the cycling lane symbols towards the motorist lane as a sort of a visual cue as to where people should ride in the cycling lane. Another one was to possibly dash the parking lane stripe or treat it in some other way that makes it look not quite the hard edge to signal that, hey, this is a fuzzy edge. You know, you don't feel secure if you're over on that side. Another that came up actually is a creative idea that came up on the list was to indicate the door zone in some fashion just at the very beginning of the block. So maybe for 10 or 15 feet with paint or something like that, maybe even before parked vehicles are adjacent to that spot, so that people kind of get a visual cue of that. So there's some ideas that we'd like you to consider and just consider the issue overall. Signage, I think the long and the short is we're happy to work with the city and the engineer on that going forward. It was kind of hard to review those plans because they're evolving at this point, but we're confident that we can work that out in terms of destinations and sign placement. I guess one of the main things there is that we want to make sure that the different types of networks, we have 2 networks, as you may recall, that those are indicated by the signage so that people who are trying to stay on the low motorist volume network know which crossing routes are actually in that network so they don't end up on a street with a lot of motorists by accident. And let's see, on Jackson, we prefer the cycling lane in the southbound direction because that's the time at which school traffic and peak commute traffic overlap in the morning. In the afternoon, you don't have that overlap. And also the northbound cycling lane starts so far back from the intersection that it's not going to be as effective at sorting the different users as they cross the intersection anyway. It's quite a ways from where people will be starting off from the signal on the south side of Jackson. Peralta, one of our members brought up that they remember there was some discussion of a crosswalk at Francis. So I'm sorry, I don't have more details on that. And I think they said there was a crosswalk at Francis 5.5 years ago, maybe before some paving or something. Again, I don't have the details, but maybe if you could ask staff about that. And for Dartmouth, the organization is asking for a traffic circle at Keynes as well. Because as it stands now, there's some sort of traffic control on every intersection from Cornell to the east, but then none from Cornell to the west. And so there's 3 blocks of just open throughway to the west, and we're concerned that motorists are really going to pick up speed in there, particularly if they come off San Pablo. You know, they're used to driving faster. They're going to turn off San Pablo and potentially drive faster to that next traffic circle. So having a traffic circle at Keynes will set the cue right there. You know, oh, I'm not on San Pablo anymore. I need to slow down. And then finally, the wider cycling lane on Posen. We really appreciate that the lane was made a little wider on one side. And the way it's shown on the plans currently, we wanted it in the downhill direction, and the downhill direction shifts sides of the street as you go over the crest near West Street or West Place. And right now it's shown in the uphill direction to the west of West. And so it needs to be on the downhill direction, which is the westbound direction to the west of West Place. So the long and the short is it needs to switch sides as it goes over the crest. So anyway, it was a lot of input. I appreciate your taking notes. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Amy Smolens, Albany Strollers and Rollers. Just wanted to pass on a couple comments from an Albany Stroller and Roller who lives on Pierce Street. She's a regular, Linny Komaromi. So she's a regular bike commuter, and she really appreciates the signage and the signage on Pierce Street. That's really going to help the safety of her commute. And I was actually at the plaza on Buchanan and Pierce yesterday from about 5:15 or so to 5:45 or 6, and there were a ton of bike commuters that were coming down the path west on the Buchanan bike path, crossing Buchanan and heading up on Pierce. They were adults. They were clearly commuting cyclists. So I was surprised at how many there were. So it's really going to be used. It's really going to enhance their safety quite a bit. One question, the sign at Talbot and Brighton was indicated as a do not enter, but I'm guessing it would be more like in Berkeley, the do not enter bicyclists and emergency vehicles accepted that I see a lot in Berkeley. And I want to pass on a question from a resident of Key Route Boulevard, because he noticed that the sharrows in the northbound lane are in the middle of the lane, 15 feet in, and he was just wondering why that is, and if he's on his bike, if he's supposed to ride his bike in the middle of the road there as opposed to offsetting it a bit more toward the right. It seems like there's room, but maybe there's a reason for that, so I was just wondering about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers on this one? Okay. So back to council for some follow-up here. Any
Commission.
questions or commissions? Sorry.
It's okay.
I spent too many years doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, as far as the Bike Boulevard versus Sharrow's difference, do you want to give us the definitions?
So Bike Boulevard is really where it's low volume, low vehicle volume streets, lower speed streets, where you really want to prioritize bicycle traffic because you're trying to put them on those high comfort level facilities. Whereas Sharrow's really can be placed as you increase volume from there and have slightly higher speeds and really help to show bicycle position along those streets, as opposed to really kind of guiding you on this low speed, low volume facility.
Okay, good. And with regards to reducing speed limits on bike boulevards, you have the vehicle code speed law to contend with, unless it's next to a school. Then
Yeah,
we can-
and next to the school means school hours.
Right.
So the vehicle code allows you to set the speed limit on local streets at 25 miles per hour. It does not have any kind of, does not allow you to go below that. Now there is some conditions where if you did a speed survey and it came back at 20 miles per hour, then you could potentially lower that and set the speed limit at 15 miles per hour. But it really becomes an enforcement issue, and if you start putting up signs that say 15 miles per hour, but they legally can't be enforced, then it creates an issue there.
Right. Yes, we'd quite like to do that, although some of us cyclists might have to slow down too. Okay. Then question for the 700 block of Pierce really was more a recommendation with regards to the crosswalks for the park and at Calhoun to integrate these in here. Is that part of the plan, Aleda? Or can we?
Yeah, on Pierce Street, is that by Calhoun?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have to apologize, I was actually talking to the audience when that happened. What was the actual request?
So the concern was that Bob has used a radar gun to clock southbound speeds up to 45 miles an hour coming over the crest and around the curve there. And his concern was that the Sharrows might not be enough to get cars to slow down if they're catching up rapidly to a bike. At least that's my take on it. And that as far as the Pierce Street Park, it's supposed to have a raised crosswalk, and that maybe that would help to slow things down. So whether it's a question of timing to get that crosswalk or raised crosswalk done sooner as a speed table for the time being, perhaps, that might help us speeding.
Right. The most recent speed survey that I have for Pierce shows speeds at 30 miles per hour by the area of the Albany Hill, and a little bit less as we approach the residential area, which is about 28, between 28 and 29, which is still a little bit higher, but not 30. Then we do have two crosswalks for the Pierce Street Park, one at Calhoun, and the other one is a raised crosswalk by the park entrance, which is just starting the residential area past the Albany Hill. What I've heard is that the park will be built in about a year or so.
Okay.
And I think for Pierce, we're ready to stripe because of the, we just rehabilitated the pavement 1 year ago at the most, or a year and a half ago. So it's ready to stripe. And we can definitely have a crosswalk, but we have to see if we can meet the ADA standards at the Calhoun location. At one point, we talked about creating a sidewalk on the west side of that intersection, just to complete the sidewalk for the park. So that project stalled because we were starting the pavement project, and because it's only very few people who can work on these things. But it's on the drawing table, and I think as long as we meet the curb ramp ADA standards, then we can actually stripe a crosswalk at Calhoun, at least that one, which is going to be cheaper than the raised crosswalk, because the raised crosswalk has the signage, I think it's going to be a flashing yield to pedestrians here, so it's going to be a flashing according to the latest request. So I don't think we have the funding right now to do that, but at least the high visibility at Calhoun, we can do it.
Okay. Certainly seems if we're out there doing other striping, that might be an optimal time, assuming we've got the ADA part of it sorted out. Great, thank you. Then the question on Peralta, whether the center line at the crest of the hill was solid or dashed, and certainly approaching the crest of a hill, we generally prefer not to have a dashed line. So is that correct? Or can we correct it?
Yeah, sorry. It's a solid line the whole way. I think the dashed line might be the existing line that we're or the existing stripe that we're removing to get the shift to accommodate the uphill bike lane. So it's a solid center line stripe though.
Okay, and this is true also between Sonoma and Marin? Not just where we're doing the...
Yeah, that's because that's an existing stripe, so that's why it looks like it's dashed. We're not proposing any changes to that center line.
Okay, we probably ought to make it be solid if we're out there striping. I agree. The suggestion that someone could pass there is not great, even if you're shifting over to pass a bike. I hope that motorists would just slow down or be extra cautious. Okay. Door zone indications. I know that the drawings we've got show or appear to show a bit of an offset to the bike symbols in the bike lane towards the left side. Is that my imagination, or have we already tried to implement that in the 95% plans?
I think we don't have anything on there that actually indicates that.
Okay, just coincidence.
Coincidence.
But maybe we should
It looks like it. Yeah.
codify that. Certainly seems like an appropriate thing to do. The dashed right edge is tempting, but I worry that people will confuse that with dashed lines to start moving across to make the right turns, although if the left line's solid, they really shouldn't. But special markings at the start of the block, an interesting one as well. And again, if you think of good symbols or signs that we can use there, markings that are clear for bike lane positioning.
I was thinking maybe just a crosshatch type stripe, but no outer line, just the stripes kind of moving bikes over, something like that. I like the idea of it just at the beginning because then it's not an ongoing maintenance issue and a lot of extra paint, but helps position coming out of the intersection. I like
okay.
Could you put text with that? Like that says door zone? Because it's a unique marking. Mm-hmm. It's not like people will encounter this in other places.
Right. We could, except we're really only talking about
a short distance.
Well, and also just a very narrow distance at 2.5 feet or something like that. So
having the text in the right orientation would make it really small. I like the idea though. Maybe we do some. Yeah.
Or putting bicycle symbols off-center to the,
Right.
and
Well, I think the offset bike symbols are something that's easy to do, and we just make it part of our standard. That'd be great. If we do the angle, cross markings on the right-hand side of the starting end of the bike lane, maybe we can do some informational signage that goes along with it. And that, I don't know if that's signs that we'd leave up forever, but we just put them out to start kind of on an educational basis that shows the bike lane and the markings and says, something, stay clear of the door zone, or some relatively brief text that lets cyclists know what that is, and hopefully motorists as well. Because that feels more like that's kind of the educational campaign side of things, and it might be hard to maintain as a standard everywhere.
I agree there needs to be some kind of educational campaign along with these improvements, informing people what sharrows are meant to be and what bicycle boulevards are.
Yep.
But I think we have to be careful we don't oversign and then people don't see anything. I kind of like it on the ground where it just says door zone. But somehow we have to educate people. Not sure what the best answer is, but.
I think it's a combination of things. I think you're right. We can put up too many signs and people already ignore signs. But if we can get to them in several different ways, if we can have it marked on the ground potentially, and have some kind of publicity around town and get to them that way.
Or put some brochure on the dashboard of parked vehicles, watch for the door zone.
What do other cities do?
But the door zone, it's we're blazing new territory here. There's not really much. I've seen at least one attempt to have a bike lane and then separate parking lane marking. Honestly, looking at those, they look confusing. So is it a double bike lane? Am I supposed to ride? Really hope nobody thinks that means they should ride right next to the car. That'd be terrible. But yeah, there's not a typical treatment, certainly that I've seen.
Yeah, and I think just also confining a bike, in this case, if we had a 2-foot stripe buffer type area, confining the bike to 4 feet at all times, even when there's cars not parked there, I don't know if that's the best idea. And in terms of other locations, that actually was where the Sharrow legend came from. It was originally only implemented along parallel parking to keep clear of the door zone, but it's become much more ubiquitous now. But and then the other thing that has happened is places have moved from just the parking tees, to actually having that 2-foot extension that goes into the bike lane, which also is supposed to indicate the door zone, which there's not a lot of education on that.
Yeah,
either.
reversing the parking tees definitely is kind of a precursor to doing some of the hash marks, but again, do people recognize it?
I was just handed an example of markings in Boston, which look like they're essentially drawing doors in the bike lane.
Yeah. What's sort of the angled stripe marking? Right?
It's an angled stripe marking,
Yeah.
so if you have a parallel line, that they're actually coming out into the...
Pointing towards you.
Pointing towards you, as if they were doors.
Right.
Another option.
Yeah. That's a...
I can pass it down.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we're looking for something.
Maybe some suggestions, maybe some pilots. If we don't know how effective different things are, let's maybe try a few in different places and see what feedback we get. To the extent that they are experimental types of things. So, Jackson Street between Buchanan and Solano. Directionality of the single bike lane that we get. Do we want southbound, northbound? The idea being that southbound sort of picks up the morning school peak and heavy traffic, and in the afternoon school traffic going the other way isn't really competing against so much vehicular traffic. Seems like a compelling argument to me, but I don't know.
Makes sense to me.
I'm on board with that.
Okay. So we'd like the southbound bike lane.
Yep.
I don't know if we can investigate the crosswalk at Francis.
Yes. There are some issues with reinstalling the crosswalk.
Okay.
First of all, it's ADA accessibility. We don't have a ramp. And the other one is the visibility, but I think we don't have a slope that is significant there. However, there are two things. When I was there, I observed students actually crossing there with no crosswalk. And it makes me nervous because it seems that there's a vertical curve, but it's mild. About 4%, is that what we said? 4.8%. And we clear the visibility at 25 miles per hour, is that right? No, at 30.
At 30.
At 30 miles per hour, which is about 200 feet from the cusp to the crosswalk. So it is 200 feet to the intersection, to the middle of Francis. So it is close to the edge, and that makes me nervous, but I mean, that's me. I mean, the main concern is that we don't have, if we want to do it, we might have to, there's a very nice garden across on the east side of Peralta. We might have to really use that for the curb ramp.
The ramp.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because we cannot use the existing driveway. I guess before it was an existing driveway that was used on the east side, but not on the, I mean, there's one the curb ramp on the west side. I don't know if it complies with the most recent standards.
Probably
it doesn't
not if
seem
it's
to.
Yeah. Okay, so we really, in terms of striping, don't have that option right now.
Let me get back and see. We're trying to work on a CIP for this year, and if we might have some money for curb ramps. We will have, and if we can build the curb ramps. As I said, we are at the edge right there. The 200 feet actually end in the middle of the intersection of Peralta and Francis, so we're pushing the edge with visibility there at 30 miles per hour. Hopefully, with the edge line and the sharrows, we will decrease the speeds, but I would like to wait for that before we decide to implement the crosswalk. I would feel more comfortable if it's between 25 and 30, the speed, the 85th percentile.
Okay, well, that may be one to sort of look at separately if there's not time to incorporate it within this. Right. Then the interest in having a traffic circle at Keynes and Dartmouth. The commission think?
Wasn't that spot where we had talked about putting some sort of paint treatment, and we kind of dropped that? I think it's a valid argument. Cars coming off of San Pablo at speed.
But are cars going to come off of San Pablo?
They will from a
They will
northbound.
from northbound,
Yeah.
but not crossing.
The right turning traffic.
Right. Do right turn people tend to go slower because they're not building up as much speed getting across?
It depends on the radius of the curve.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, do we have a cost estimate on the circles that we're doing?
No, not at this point, because it's going to really depend on the type of treatment. So that might be something to come back with then.
Potentially a lot to do that, but maybe we can flag that as a location to consider. So then there was the comment about on Posen, keeping the wide bike lane on the uphill side as the slope of the road changes. If you can.
I think that was an error in the cross section.
I'm sorry, downhill, yes.
Yeah, on the downhill side.
Where bikes are going fast.
Right.
And thus don't have as much time to react.
So to clarify, was that the wide, to actually switch the wide piece? Okay.
Right, so.
Similar to what we are doing on.
Right, once you
Peralta,
cross the
so-
crest of the hill, then you
Yeah.
need to switch it to the opposite side.
Yeah.
Since it's not continuously uphill or downhill in one direction. Okay, and then the do not enter sign at Talbot and Brighton, adding a bikes accepted supplemental sign on that makes perfect sense. I think covered most, if not all, the public comments we got. Any more from commissioners? Or are we overwhelmed?
There was one about the Sharrow positioning that I actually wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So actually, in the NACTO guidelines, when the posted speed limit is 25 miles per hour or less, it actually does recommend centering it on the lane. That has the benefit of reducing the wear on it, because then cars are not driving over the sharrows continuously, which really preserves the life of those sharrows. And in addition, it becomes pretty tight for for cars to overtake the bikes. And so having the bikes take the full lane is what's recommended in those.
Okay. Any further thoughts? Motions? I would suggest, with regards to a motion, that not only do we recommend council approve the final plans, but that move to implement. I know that's implied, but clear?
Okay, before I make a motion, I want to be sure, though, that we've got the circles that they're still being worked on, both for public safety and for maintenance. And are we making canes an add-on? Is that?
I thought you left it that it was to be considered in the future, depending on the cost.
So was that an add-on? Or is that, I mean, it seems like it either should be an, if it's not an add-on, do we ever get to the future? Does that make sense?
Right.
It might just get dropped and never be picked up again.
I guess the question is, what do we want to consider in terms of, other than cost, pros and cons for having a circle there?
At Keynes?
At Keynes. Dartmouth. So the idea being that traffic, that even once we prohibit the left turns off of San Pablo, we'll still have right turning traffic entering Dartmouth. And if the first intersection they come to has a traffic circle, then maybe that sets the character for the bike boulevard. I don't recall if there had been some consideration that the narrowness of Keynes made it less suitable for a traffic circle at that location.
I don't believe so. I don't think the cross-section changes between there and the other locations.
I think the only thing that we have to, for the traffic circles and everything, is to really communicate with the fire department, make sure that the design complies with their turning radii, and well, I guess mountable curbs would be, if we can do like mountable curbs on the circles, but also just share the plans with I want to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that to go down on a regular response rate, so we'll have to take a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, and we would expect that emergency vehicles as well as delivery trucks and those sorts of vehicles would actually turn in front of the traffic circle. They wouldn't be able to make a left turn around it. So we're designing it to accommodate that. So
I think some other sort of design criteria or things to look at are, again, to make sure that as vehicles divert around the circle, that between the edge of the circle and the nearest crosswalk, we probably want at least 16 feet. I've seen some that use 12 feet, which is a traffic lane, but when cars are making a turn or a curving maneuver, they don't do it well, tend to drift into the crosswalk. Don't necessarily want the crosswalks pushed back too much, so they're out of good line of sight. Mountable curbs are better than nothing. on these streets, we probably don't have to make the circles particularly big. And I know that there's often a temptation to fill them with landscaping and other things. I'd be very cautious or judicious in how we apply anything like that, because weeds grow up pretty tall, it becomes a maintenance issue, and then you can't see the other side of the circle. That's a real concern. I think my general principle is, first and foremost, it's a traffic calming device, not a neighborhood beautification device. There are places where that sort of thing works better. The middle of the intersection always makes me very nervous.
The ones by the North Berkeley Library on the Sonoma side, they seem really nice, and they don't seem very high maintenance as far as taking care of them.
No, we've got some that are very nice. I mean, the one at Posen and Fordway,
Yeah,
all right?
marginally nice.
Yeah, well, it's a big intersection. So the traffic circle with a single tree there, from a visibility perspective, works great. The tree is mature enough that the branches are up out of a driver's line of sight. You can see, there may be a little bit of maintenance issues, but otherwise the functionality of it is pretty good. But that's a huge intersection. I don't know how much we're going to have that opportunity here, and installing good-sized trees like that is adding to the cost, and then makes it so that you really can't drive over it at all. And if if you can cut off the left turns, maybe that's fine, but I'd make sure that the design vehicle consideration takes into account what our fire department has. Just kind of general comments as you work on any circle design. Thoughts?
We haven't really answered the question.
Oh. Good point. Do we want one or not?
I think we do.
Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Put it on the list. We can always cut it out later if we don't have enough money or some other issue comes up. But let's start that in so that we don't have to worry about when is the future, when do we get to add it.
Great.
All right.
Okay, so do you want to move?
Let me give a shot at it. And so I move that we approve the 95% plans, direct staff to proceed with development of construction plans, and further develop signage, and recommend to council to approve the final plans for the ATP striping and signage projects, and move forward with implementation.
But do you want to specifically add in the traffic circle on Keynes? Because that's not part of this.
I think it was going to get added in
Okay,
the
So
100%
incorporating the
plans.
comments we've made.
And incorporate the comments we've made would cover that.
Then I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for all of your input. I think this can be a really good plan. So next.
Thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is announcements and communications. 7A, report on MTC regional call for projects due July 24th.
This is, I'm preparing a grant for the Safe Routes School project for Cornell Elementary. This is one of the two grants that I was going to apply for the state-wide call for projects that I only had time to finish one. So I'm going with the two again for MTC call for projects. So it's going to be the San Pablo and Buchanan Complete Streets concept. I mean, not concept, design and implementation, and the Cornell Safe Routes School project. That includes it's an ATP project that includes a median between Cornell and Evelyn. It will restrict the left turns onto Cornell, onto Talbot from Marin, and it will encourage the drop off on the right hand side of the street, not prevent some jaywalking at Cornell. So that's what we're trying to do. hopefully, if we get it, we're going to be implementing it with phase 3 and also with undergrounding, if we get it.
Okay. So since the results of the state application aren't known yet, we're just submitting everything we've got for this.
Submitting again this one,
Good.
just in case,
Ah.
just to be covered.
Good strategy. Very good. Okay. Next is our future agenda items. Comments on these? This includes the 10-minute parking at Cugini's for next month. The El Cerrito Creekside project, is that going to be ready for next month?
Yes.
Okay.
It was going to be at this meeting, but staff didn't, Jeff didn't get enough information from El
Right.
Cerrito, so.
Okay. All right, good.
It is the 4th Thursday in July, which is, I think, the
24th.
4th, uh-huh.
Yeah, July 24th. Which I will not be here that day, but hopefully enough others will be.
Regarding the school zones, I would like to request to be presented in September. As I will be working on this grant, I don't have time to actually do anything. So.
Right, okay. Having recently implemented one of those, if you got any questions, let me know. For the school speed zones?
Oh, yes, I was going to talk
Okay.
to you about that.
Yeah. Great. And Keynes and Adams bicycle facility concept. No
It
date
seems that
yet.
Alameda County is moving with the procurement of the consultant for all of the projects that they selected. I got a call from Alameda County regarding the parking study. So we already developed a schedule for the parking study. We're going with the city of San Leandro as well. So it's going to be, I guess, one consultant to work on the two cities parking design, but not parking management study. There's different needs. So San Leandro is a structure, and for us, it's going to be a citywide parking management study.
Will we have any input on that study before they start? Like, give them concerns that we have? Is that possible or not?
So you want to have? Do you want to see the scope of work? I can send you the scope of work, or do you want the commission to see it? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I guess I'm asking if the commission wants to see or wants input into what they're looking at before we do the study.
Perfect. We can put it in the July meeting. And if you're going to be absent, I'll try. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the scope of work as soon as possible, maybe tomorrow. And it's going to be for discussion in the July meeting. And if you have feedback for it, maybe let me know, because I guess you're going to be on vacation or, yeah. So I don't want to interrupt your vacation. Sorry.
Sounds good. Okay. And the last item that we've got listed on here is working with the police department regarding policy for citations for violation of pedestrian right-of-way, particularly when it
The police
involves a
department.
crash. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to check with Lieutenant Geisberger to see where they're at regarding that.
Okay.
I was thinking that they might be ready in the fall or something like that.
All right.
Maybe starting the winter months.
Okay. Right. Any other items that we want to add?
No, none come to mind immediately.
Very good. Well, thank you all for attending and all of your input again. We'll be adjourned. Night.